Good day, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. We are back. Hope you are well and everything is going well with you. The European leagues, the major European leagues have ended. Real Madrid won the Champions League, and that just leaves the Nordic leagues at this moment in time, pretty much, doesn't it, Steve, in terms of ongoing leagues? So delighted to welcome you to this episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. Steve, how are you, my friend?
Jonathan, I'm okay. I'm a little bit better this week, my good pal. And yes, although we are going on a bit of a, shall we call it an early summer break for both leagues now. Certainly, I think Sweden has a good 3 weeks off. Norway, not far off that either. We've got international matches coming. So, yeah, a bit of a break, which is kind of maybe needed for some teams. But we're well into the season now, and it's exciting stuff.
Yeah, just looking at the next round of E10 fixtures isn't until actually the 18th of June. We're currently at the end of May as we record this. We just had a round on Saturday and Sunday, 28th and 29th of May in Norway. We are going to start in Norway. And then in part two, we will head over to Sweden and catch up with the latest going on in Sweden. And I have to say, before we get into this show, thank you so much to everyone who's left a question on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. We put out a call for questions this week and we've been inundated. 17 questions as we stand at the time of recording. So we're going to try and get through as many of them as we can, as well as bringing you the latest from both leagues. So a lot to get our teeth into. So let's get started, Steve. I'm going to read out the results from last week's games. So May 28th, that was the day of the Champions League final. We had Hamkan 1, Odd 2, Strømsgodset 3, Viking 2, and then, of course, Real Madrid 1, Liverpool 0, if anyone missed that. Sunday, 29th of May, Haugesund 2, Arlesen 2, FK Jerv 0, Sarpsborg 5. Bodø Glimt lost away to Molde 3-1 in that game. Big game, top of the table clash. Tromsø 2, Lillestrøm 2, and then Vålerenga 0, Rosenborg 4. Battering for Vålerenga there. Just in case anyone missed it as well, because we did have a midweek round since we recorded the last episode. 25th of May and 26th of May. We had Arlesen 2, Jerv 1, Glimt 2, Strømsgodset 2. So tough run of fixtures for Glimt. 1 point from 6. Odd 0, Sandefjord 1, Viking 1, Hamkan 1, Lillestrøm 2, Vålerenga 0. And then on the Thursday, we had Rosenborg 3, Haugesund 3, and Sarpsborg 1, Molde 2, which leaves the table currently looking, a little bit different. You know, it's been a bit of an unpredictable season, hasn't it? And we will talk about that in the pod. But Lillestrøm currently top after 10 games, 24 points. Molde in second, 22 points, 10 games played, and Viking third, 11 games played, 21 points. Strømsgodset fourth. So really topsy-turvy table. Steve, let's get you started. The first place we want to start this episode, isn't it? Really, with the Molde Glimt game. Huge result for Molde, that.
Huge win for them. And I did the preview show this week for those who are on Patreon, and I suggested that I expected Bodø Glimt to actually put up a good performance here and at least not lose the game. Usually they raise it for big occasions. But on this occasion, they couldn't quite do it. And I think the XG for this game, Glimt certainly edged it. I think they were over like 2.25 XG compared to Molde, which was like 1.6, I think. So in a way, they were a bit unlucky here, Bodø Glimt. But they haven't kept a clean sheet yet this season, Jonathan. And that's the fundamental problem for this team. Again, I think they've been a bit unlucky in terms of their raw statistics and numbers. But Molde, it was just their day. They took their chances when it mattered. And, they've now beaten Bodø Glimt twice this season, once in the cup final and now in the league. And I guess the manager will say, you know what, I was right to switch to this 3-4-3 formation. It's got us second in the table now. We've won 5 games in a row, beating Glimt twice. And at the moment, it's looking quite good for Molde.
Yeah, it's looking quite good for Molde, as you say. They're second in the table, definitely in contention for that title race. Steve, what are your thoughts? I mean, obviously the opening goal from Grudem, that Fofana, your man, is on the score sheet. Then Mugisha and Højbjerg on goal contributed to this 3-1 loss for Bodø Glimt, and it's not been a great time for them. And you know, while we can, let's fill in one of our first of our 17 questions. I guess we did have a question from a follower who goes by the name of
Team Overs, wasn't it?
Well, no, I'm going to go for FPL Pasty at FPL_Pasty. He says, Bodø Glimt, are they not the force of the last couple of seasons? And that's the first question I'm going to ask you, Steve.
That's a good question. I mean, we seem to get this question every week now, don't we? And it's fairly legit. They haven't been the same this season, that's for sure. It's been a build-up of a lot of matches. They're in Europe. They had the cup round as well to deal with. And they haven't quite been the same, really, since the going over from Mourinho's Roma. I think there has still been a hangover from that fixture. And they're definitely going to be pleased that there's a 2-3 week break here, because they can reset and stuff like that. They have lost quality, let's be honest, they have. And you can't keep losing your best players and expect to keep performing. I mean, they've done remarkably well last season after still losing a lot. I certainly haven't given up on Bodø Glimt, Jonathan. I expect them to come rebounding back. They've got a decent set of fixtures coming up soon. But so far, it looks like they're not the force of what they were. So that's a simple answer.
When you say they've not really recovered from the loss to Roma, do you mean physically in terms of injuries, or do you just mean like mentally? I mean, we know what happened with the manager. Kjetil Knutsen obviously commented saying that he was thinking of even quitting football. I mean,
mentally,
Mourinho can get a manager's head. But
it wasn't just that
hangover. What do you attribute this to? Because it's not a good sign, is it?
I think for like 2.5 years, everyone loved Bodø Glimt, the storyline, this almost romantic tale of a side that come from nowhere just to really win 2 league titles in a row. Everyone was loving Bodø Glimt, apart from Tromsø fans. Everyone was loving this team. And then you get to a stage where there's sort of jealousy sits in. It's like, they're not the new kids on the block anymore, and everyone kind of wants to beat them. And I think the Roma match was kind of a watershed in that a little bit. That they were kind of everything's been done in quite a nice way. They've enjoyed their football, but Mourinho and that kind of brought his dark arts to the table, more the nasty side of football a little bit, and I think kind of shell shocked them a bit. There was the Ulrik Saltner's red card against Viking, which didn't go down particularly well. I think every time now they don't do things as well, Knutsen comes under some criticism because they raise the bar so high. When things aren't going so well, there's question marks now. So I think it's just a collection of things adding up. They did have some injuries, but it's not been too bad. But I've looked at the raw numbers. They're actually, before the Molde game, they had the best average expected goals against in the league. So statistically, it was the best defence, even though they conceded a few goals. But the big thing is they're down on their XG this year, Jonathan. They're not scoring as many goals as in the past, and they're not probably creating as many big chances in the past. Quite what I can put that down to, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it's a change of personnel. Maybe it's teams have worked out a different way to play against them. Maybe they just need to reset a bit. They do look a little bit leggy and not quite as up for it physically. A little bit. I've seen it happen at my own team, Leeds United, with Bielsa. After a certain amount of time, you kind of lose a little bit of the physical drive, don't you, when you push so hard? So it's a collection of things, I think. Yeah,
interesting analysis there from you. And it leads on to, there's plenty more questions, I guess, here. But you mentioned that sort of, I just want to ask you about their recruitment as well. Do you think that they need to maybe spend in this upcoming, we've got the summer window coming. We'll obviously go into that in more detail in future pods. But do you think that they are going to be looking to recruit? Do you think they'll be very active? Or do you think that they've been poorly recruiting in this, this winter window just gone? Because traditionally they've been so good at replacing players, but they have lost so many, haven't they?
I think they need to look at a goalkeeper. I've noticed recently that there's been some... I talked about Mads Christiansen pre-season. He was in my 10 to watch on the Patreon videos. Karlstrom at Molde has actually done a lot better than I expected. And of the big teams, or the teams that are up there, they have the weakest goalkeeper, in my opinion, in Nikita Kaikin, who at times has done well in the last 2.5 years. But really, sometimes I've got to ask the question, was he really being tested that much? Did he have that much to do? And probably not. He came up big in some moments, but he's not had a good season. And goalkeeper can make a big difference to you. I think they've probably missed Marius Luda more than people expected as well. And obviously, Fredrik Andre Bjørkan was maybe the best player in the entire league. And, when Mangoma's not done too badly in that spot, in fairness, but he's not a natural left footer. I'd be looking at a natural left back, probably a goalkeeper, and maybe another centre back as well. I think that's the area they need to improve a little bit. I think the rest of the team is not looking too bad, certainly when Solbakken comes back from his injury. But I think maybe they do need certainly a couple of reinforcements.
Good stuff. Thanks for that, Steve, and thanks for your question there, FPL Pasty. In other games, obviously that leaves Bodø Glimt now in 8th place, which is crazy. I mean, I know they've played 9 games, got a game in hand on Lillestrøm, but even if they were to win that game in hand, they would still be 8 points behind or 11 points behind Lillestrøm at the top, which is crazy, really, for this Bodø Glimt team. Only 3 wins all season in 9 games. Let's move on. You want to now discuss Viking, because they have had a bit of a rough time of it, a couple of defeats.
Just before that, I will go to Timo Overs' question. Who's more likely to win the league, Bodø Glimt or Malmö? I mean, from my perspective, I think I actually would probably say Malmö, but I don't know if you'd agree with that or not. But neither at the minute, is it? But Viking, Jonathan. They've been going well, but they lost against Stroms Godset. Another match where the XG story was a lot different to the result. Viking, for me, should have not lost this game. It was 1-1, and they missed chances to go 2-1 up when they got punished. Godset are just on this mad run where a lot of things are going their way. They're playing some good football, but they're also getting a bit lucky in some of their matches. This was one of them. Viking might look back at this and think, this was 3 points that we let slip, because if they have won that, they'll be up to 24. They're still in the hunt, but they've only won 1 of the last 5 now, Viking. They've massively missed Latko Tripic, who has missed quite a lot of games recently. Crucial attacker, big part of the team. And I think it's affected them in a negative way. And it's allowed your Molders and your Lillestrøm to sort of take advantage of that. So disappointing result for them. But performance was still strong, though. So they'll look back at this one with regrets.
Johan Hove gave Godset the lead. Berisha with a penalty to equalise. Lars Jorgen Salvesen made it 2-1. Herman Stengel with a penalty to make it 3-1. And then Berisha again narrowed the deficit to 3-2 in the 71st minute, but not enough. And Godset get the win. Steve, just want to give a shout out to Alex at P2P_Alex. His question was about Glimt, which we've answered, which was the selling of players. Is that finally catching up with Bodø? I think you answered that in your last question. So thanks so much to you, Alex, for listening and engaging. But the next question is about Godset, in fact. It's a question we got from Minas Vergis, who asks, is Johan Hove arguably the hottest under-23 name in the Elite Series right now? And what is his ceiling, in your opinion?
I'm pretty sure I did an article about him on Scout. He was either last season or the season before. Certainly he was one of the player profiles that I did. He's come out of nowhere this season. He started the season slowly. A lot of players did, but Godset, by the way, they didn't come out the traps well. But he's just been on fire of late. 5 goals in his last 4 games, 2 assists, and there's non-stop. He's a really good box-to-box midfielder. He gets into some fantastic positions in that penalty area. He just has a great sense of where he needs to be to score a goal. And, he's not that old, 21. He's 22 in September. He's now seemingly maturing even more. And he's not in the greatest team in the world either. So for him to be performing like this at Godset is quite impressive. What is his actual ceiling? Really, really hard to say. I don't know. I think maybe physically he just needs to still improve a little bit. But obviously, I think the ceiling is higher than Eliteserien level. Somewhere like Eredivisie maybe. Something it's really hard to say sometimes, isn't it? And what was the other part of the question? Is he the hottest talent in the league right now, or young talent in the league? Yeah, I mean, there's not that many actually at the moment. The cupboard's a little bit bare. It will come full again soon, but yeah, he probably is the standout player of his age category.
21-year-old. He's played 10 games this season in Elite Series, 6 goals, 2 assists. What kind of player is he, Steve?
Box-to-box midfielder, really, I would say. He's someone who arrives into the box late and finds good positions. I did a really in-depth piece on him for Wisecout. I'll have to see if I can dig it out somewhere and link it in, because there was a great deal of research done in. Last season, I don't think he was quite as strong as he was in 2020. That was it. He had a great breakout campaign in 2020. Last season, he wasn't quite as strong, but he seems to have rebounded now after a groggy start. But their whole team had a groggy start, but they've made a few personnel changes to really help things out at Godset there. And he looks to be well on his way, on absolute fire. He definitely did not want this early summer break to come, because Godset are playing great football right now.
Yeah, and he's an under-21 international as well for Norway. His name's Johan Hove. Maybe Brighton and Hove Albion might be looking at him. Who knows? They tend to scout this region quite well. So thanks a lot for your question there at Minas Vergis. A decent win for Godset there. Steve, you want to talk about Lillestrøm now, because they're top of the table. They're unbeaten. They are the team to beat at this moment in time, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm surprised that they are the only remaining unbeaten side after 10 games, 7 wins, 3 draws. They very nearly beat Tromsø as well on Sunday. They were 2-1 up, but conceded late. Now, that for me was a trap game for them, because they'd just beaten Vålerenga in a big local derby on the 25th of May. And I thought they'd be a bit flat going up to a Tromsø side who actually had a whole week off. So for me, that was a trap game, and they very nearly won it. So that showed good mental resolve and qualities in that respect. Although to concede a free kick in the 90th minute, a header from a set piece, I think was a little bit poor. But that maybe was the week had caught up with them. But they'll take a point now. I think it's not a bad point. They are in title contention for sure. I don't think their underlying numbers are as strong as someone like a Molde or a Viking, or even a couple of others for that matter. But they've got a good thing going here at Lillestrøm, a good mix of physical, technical. The home field advantage is crucial for them. They've still not conceded a goal at home. Like, they've played 5 games, 5 wins, 10 goals scored, none conceded. They haven't conceded on their own field. Grass pitch in Åråsen Stadium, and it's a hard surface for a lot of teams to come. Not many teams play on grass now in Norway. So I think for a lot of the visitors who come there, then they're finding it quite difficult. This is a good mix of a team. My gut feeling tells me I don't think they'll go and win the league, but you have to consider them a contender.
Yeah, doing really well. We did talk about them on the last episode as well. We got one question. It's another one of our questions at Harry Nathan 404. Harry Nathan, a loyal supporter and follower. I really appreciate your support. He says, how has there been such a big reverse between Lillestrøm and Vålerenga? In 2020, VIF finished 3rd and LSK weren't even in the league. 2 years later, LSK are top after 10 games and VIF are 11th. Having played more games than 4 sides below them, they could drop to 13th. Let's keep your thoughts on Vålerenga for now, because we'll come to them later, unless you wanted to sort of briefly mention them, Steve, but because we've got a few questions about them. But, how's there been such a big reverse between these two teams in general, and with focus on Lillestrøm? Yeah,
I think we've said it before. They are an example of where relegation is actually a good thing for a club. And the same might actually happen to Brann again. Brann recently beat Mjøndalen 7-0, by the way, and they look like they're going to return immediately. But I think Lillestrøm needed a reset. And they've come back up. And sometimes when you come back up, you're a lot more hungry, aren't you? I sense the fans are really wanting it more, because they had them difficult times and they're enjoying it an awful lot more since they've come back up. But they've got a manager, Geir Bakke, who historically was tactically astute, well-respected, and got the best out of teams. But he was always 4-4-2 from what I remember him as. But he adapted his system into this 3-4-3 or 3-4-1-2, whatever you want to call it. And they've looked, ever since he did that, I think it was like game 5 or 6 last season, they've just looked a great unit, So I think it's a combination of the manager has been willing to adapt. The fans have been really up for it, generating a better atmosphere. They've had difficult times and really enjoying it now. And also recruitment. They've got recruitment right. I think they've brought in a few older heads, which have made a difference, but also combine that with some younger players, and crucially also a lot of physically tough players. Some really big lads who are hard to beat in duels. So I think it's a combination of things why Lillestrøm have done well. And obviously we'll talk about Vålerenga soon, but from the Lillestrøm point of view, I would say that those are the main factors.
Yeah, and their most recent result was a 2-2 draw, wasn't it, Steve? I mean, they went to Tromsø and got that draw. It's the first time they haven't won in 4 games. Kitalano and Moses B with a late equaliser. Ifeanyi Matthew and Dragsness for Lillestrøm. So thanks a lot, Harry Nathan, for your question. By the way, before we move on as well, I just want to give a big shout out to those who have backed us on Patreon this week. We've got a few new Patreons who've signed up to get the weekend preview shows and also the bonus content, profiles, things like that. So I just want to give a shout out to those people. We won't name them just for data protection, but if you do want a shout out on the pod, then feel free to DM us or leave us a message on Patreon. We'll happily promote or plug you and give you a shout out. So yeah, just a quick shout, patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast if you do want some extra weekly bonus content. And thanks so much for those people who are supporting us, the new patrons and also the existing patrons. We really, as I say, appreciate all your support. And thank you, Harry, Nathan, for your question as well. So yeah, good times for Lillestrøm at this moment in time. We did talk about them as well on the last 3 shows. So if you wanted to dip back again, Steve, you've done some quite great analysis on them in recent times, I think. So I think we'll leave it there with them. But we will move on to the other part of Harry's question. What is going on with Vålerenga, Steve?
Oh, yes. And I think we've got a question from Jürgen Holmholm as well about whether they need to keep Fagermo as manager. It just isn't happening for them. They're down in 11th place. They've lost 4 of their last 5 games. Just got beaten 4-0 by Rosenborg. It's a disaster. And ever since we've started doing this podcast, it feels like Vålerenga just are not doing what they should be doing. Right from, the Ronnie Dyler days. This is a big club in Norwegian terms, but they haven't won a league title for, I think, 2005. It's the last time they won a league. They should be doing a lot better. They should be challenging for medals, or at least looking like they can challenge for medals. But there were some questions directed at the end of the game against Rosenborg, whether they're going to stay up or not, which that is not what you want to be hearing if you're Vålerenga fans or a manager or anyone associated with the club. I'm trying to pinpoint exactly what's going wrong with them, and I've got a few theories, but yeah, it's not good right now.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at your pre-season preview. You had your predictions for them, didn't you? Struggling to load it now, actually.
6, I think. They're having 6 behind Lillestrøm.
Yeah. What exactly is going on? Because they've been on a bit of an upward trajectory, haven't they, in recent seasons?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, Fagermo, certainly when he come in, I think the COVID season he came in and he did a solid enough job. The problem with this manager, and he recently said in an interview that if he's allowed to stay on, then he's going to completely reset things and he's going to focus on defence. So next time you see Vålerenga, they're going to be looking to grind out an awful, ugly 1-0 win, things like that. Now, whether fans want that, I don't know. I don't think the fans do want that. I think the fans want entertaining football. And he's been trying to play entertaining football the last 2.5 years, but it's not his natural way. He's a naturally more pragmatic coach. I wouldn't call him like an ultra, boring coach or anything like mega defensive, like Sam Allardyce or something. But let's compare him to, say, the Sean Dyche of Norway, where he's about getting effective results no matter how he does it. But I think he's tried to kind of go out of his comfort zone and it hasn't worked for Fagermo. And he's not been willing to really adapt his tactics. He's always been a 4-3-3 merchant and nothing's changed there at all. You look at some of these other managers across the league, across the world, I think you just have to adapt in this day and age, Jonathan. He's not been able to do it. So I think that's been a problem. There's also this sort of flat feeling around the club. I think the fans, they're a bit angry that they're not been able to compete up in the top for the medals that often in the last sort of decade, really. They want more. They think they deserve more. And there's always, as soon as the negative results start coming, then there's a lot of criticism and stuff like that. And it's like the atmosphere, compare that to Lillestrøm, say, is completely on the other way around. So, yeah, it's a circle of problems and negativity that are conspiring. There's also maybe the recruitment side of things to look at as well and things like that. But the manager, for me, I feel like his time's up there. I've got to be honest, I think they might need a fresh face. It's not just on him, but I think it's maybe time.
So, in a word, to answer Jürgen Holmholm's question, Fagermo should go, is your opinion? Yes?
I personally would fire him. I mean, I tweeted something out.
Who would you? Is there a sort of a sense that he might get sacked, and who might be a replacement?
I mean, he's been under fire even before the Strømsgodset game, which they conceded 3 goals in 5 minutes in that match, and then they lost against their local rivals 2-0 away, Lillestrøm, which that's bad enough, and then you get beat 4-0 by Rosenborg at home, but. I think I tweeted something out a day or two ago that they actually had a higher XG than Rosenborg in that game. Now, the manager cannot account for goalkeeping mistakes, terrible finishing, and individual errors. That isn't really on the manager, is it? So it's not just about that. The players have got to take some responsibility as well. but I just wonder if their heads are fully focused at the moment. And I think they need someone new in. And I mean, at the end of the day, Fagermo is a strong disciplinarian, organised, and he often is a good motivator. So what type of manager do they need? You know, some would say, they need a real shake-up here and they need someone strong in who's going to rein them in. Well, that's what Fagermo is. So I'm struggling to kind of think what sort of manager is best for Vålerenga now. I'm kind of lost a bit, really, because I think the type of manager you feel they need, they've kind of got.
Yeah, and the first goal, I mean, you can't legislate for that. It's an absolute howler. It's a long-range effort that kind of centre the goal, and keeper kind of flaps at it, doesn't he? Good to see Stefano Vecchio on the score sheet for Rosenborg as well. 4-0 win for them. It's a bit strange, isn't it? Because you look at the Vålerenga team, you've got the likes of Sahrawi, Odin Thiago Holmer we talked about, Donham, who's come back, Kjartansson. There's a lot of players there that you'd expect to do quite well. But it's not working out for Vålerenga. So thanks so much for your question there, Jürgen Honholm, and also to the others who asked questions on that. Let's move on, Steve, to your next point, which is Christiansen's postponement.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to rack my brains, Jonathan, about the type of manager that Vålerenga need. Maybe they need like someone modern and young. You know, it's a really difficult one for them there, and they're kind of stuck. You know, I don't know. I think I'm gonna have to really think about that. Maybe talk about it in a future pod. But yeah, Christiansen, I think they've had a bit of luck actually, or bad luck and good luck in both respects. They've still only got 1 point in the table, but both matches got postponed from them last week. They had 5 or 6 injuries anyway, who were unable to play. But then a massive virus has spread through the whole squad and staff. I read that at least 12 people were affected prior to the midweek round against who was the midweek round against Tromsø, I think it was. And so that naturally got postponed. They were then set to play Sandefjord, and they obviously not enough people had recovered for that. So kind of very unusual circumstances that this virus spread through the whole squad. I actually think they'd have lost both games anyway, though, because they have not been playing well. They've got these injuries in defence, like I said. And the thing is, those matches are winnable. Tromsø at home is a winnable match. Sandefjord away is a chance to get 3 points. So those are now going to get rescheduled. I'm not sure exactly when, but it will be in the summer at some stage. But it would probably come at a time when they're going to have players back from injury. So I think they've had a bit of a break this week, Christiansen. But at the same time, you know, if you had said to them on the 31st of May that they've got 1 point in the table, they would not have been happy if you told them that pre-season.
Yeah, really tough season for Christiansen. We did talk about them in the last episode as well. We had a bit of a debrief on their woes, which you went into quite well, and the Owls. We've had the question from Team Overs, what's more likely, Bodø, Glimt or Malmö winning their league? Your answer was maybe Malmö. I'm not quite sure if I had to go along with that. I think it's a great question, by the way. But let's move on to a sort of slightly different questions that have been asked us that are a bit more general. And you've got one, Steve, after 10 matches, who do you tip to go down in Eliteserien? And that's from Sound and Navia, at SNDRNVIA on Twitter, based in Norway. Looks like maybe a Seattle Sounders fan, maybe. But what's your thoughts on that question there, Steve? Who do you tip to go down at present?
Yeah, nice question. Thanks very much for that. I always quite like Seattle Sounders, actually, in MLS. Nice big stadium up there they've got. But 3 teams to go down. I think Jerv go down. I said that at the start of the season, and I actually praised them on the last episode, but I think it was I kind of cursed them a bit because they now look a bit out of their depth, Jonathan. I think the matches have kind of caught up with them a bit. They are the worst team statistically at both ends of the field, and ultimately they just haven't got the quality. And I don't want to criticise them at all. That because I think 7 points for them is a really good outcome actually after 9 games. And you know, if they kind of use this break to reset, maybe they can come back firing again. But I think they're a team that just look out the depth here. Christiansen at the moment, you've got to say they go down. They've got a lot of games in hand, but I mean, Burnley had about 10 games in hand, didn't they, in the Premier League this season? And they ended up going down as well. So it's not always the best thing to have these matches in hand. You've got to have points on the board. So at the moment, those two are the most likely. And I always say the team that finishes in the 14th has got a good chance of staying up because the golfing class between Eliteserien and Obos usually is enough. Wasn't the case last season. Not sure about this year because I think Obos looks quite a good level. There's some good teams in that top 4 or 5 there now. So I would say probably at the moment Sandefjord or HamKam for the 14th spot. are the most likely. Haugesund, I think there was a question about them soon, but they look like they might be on more of an upward trend. But probably I stick Sandefjord as my third team, but could be HamKam, could be Haugesund.
Yeah, and we do have a question on Haugesund, who are 14th at this moment in time after 10 games they've played. So they've got other teams around them have got games in hand, haven't they? HamKam, Sandefjord, Jörv, and Christiansen all got games in hand on Haugesund. Question from @Reed Tromso. He was happy with the Derby win in the last game. We even named the episode after it. The Derby result, sorry, not win. But he asks, do you think that Badu and Dor can keep Haugesund up? And he says, will they be able to hold on to him? He's been amazing for them so far this season.
Yeah, I think fair play to Haugesund for turning around the shocking start they had. They lost the first 5 fixtures and they looked horrible in most of those as well. But since then, they've rebounded really well. Just one defeat, and that was to Bodø Glimt at home. They should have won the last 2, actually, Jonathan. 3-1 up at Rosenborg and only drew. And 2-1 up against Allsvenskan with 5 minutes to go and only managed to draw as well. But it's better than what they were doing. And Dors had a big part to play here. Their defence doesn't look very good this season at all. So they need their attacking players to help them out, and Dor is doing that. Could he keep? I think he could just about keep them up. I do like how they've responded. They seem to be up for it, up for the fight, and they may well escape danger this season if they keep up this run of form they've done the last month.
Yeah, and I don't know if you want to give a bit of a breakdown on Ali Yuan Bador. He's got 10 games, 5 goals, 4 assists this season. That's an incredible ratio. Looks to be a left-sided player. Is it left winger?
Yeah, I think he might have missed the first game or two off the top of my head. Just checking on my spreadsheet now. No, he didn't actually. But he's a physical player. He'll get involved. He's not shy of getting stuck in, and I like that about him. And his finishing is, I wouldn't call him the most composed finisher in the world, but he will hit the ball hard, and he won't leave anything out there on the field. That sort of player, and it's kind of what they need, really. They play on grass pitch at home. It's not always about the technical skills on that surface. It's about physical, getting stuck in, and he's got a drive and determination. You're right that part of the question was, can they keep him? And he's the sort of player that maybe well looked at, to be honest, in the summer window. So yeah, that could be difficult for Haugesund to keep him.
All right. Well, thanks so much, @Reed Tromso, for your question as well. We've nearly wrapped up for part 1 of Norway, but Steve, I'm going to ask you a couple of general questions that we've had. First one's from Francisco Martins, who's based in Portugal. He says, what new talents do you identify as emerging in the secondary divisions of Norway and Sweden that have the potential to cross into bigger clubs? As a scout, I am shocked that in my country, Portugal, the Nordic markets aren't considered. South America is always a priority over here. That could potentially be related to George Mendes, maybe Jorge Mendes, who knows, and the influence there. But Steve, what are your thoughts? I mean, you don't need to go reel off too many names. Francisco, my advice probably maybe patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. We've got our 10 to watches on there. Allsvenskan 10 to watch and Eliteserien 10 to watch. Obviously players in the top divisions, but you might see 1 or 2 gems as a scout you might like. But in general, Steve, have you got maybe 1 or 2 names from the Norway second division that maybe have caught your eye or that you've heard of?
Yeah, I'm actually following Obos a bit more this season, Jonathan. And there's one name everyone's talking about, and this Jonathan Braut Brun, who's on loan at start from Lillestrøm. He's incredibly scored 11 goals already this season. And he did that in his first 7 appearances. He hasn't actually scored in his last 2. But some hit rate that for a guy on loan from... So that's a name. Jonathan Braut Bruns. And... there's always some talent down here in the Obos League, and it's often some loans as well. But that is probably the one name that stands out to me. Like I said, I'm still learning a bit about Obos, but I'm trying to get more stuck into that division because it does look a lot of a better standard this season than it ever has done, and that does interest me.
Yeah, great stuff. And I would suggest in the Swedish second division, it's a tough one, actually. It's a good question. The Nordic market, I mean, Portugal doesn't really tend to sort of sign many players from the Nordic League, as he's alluded to. I'd be interested that, someone like Williot Swedberg, who we're going to talk about in part 2, he potentially would suit. I think like a Braga or maybe even like a Porto or someone like that. You don't often get it. It's often Belgium or maybe someone like that is more the destination, Turkey. But in terms of players, maybe in the second division, I mean, obviously you've got Bromma Poikina who are back now in Super and they've always got an incredible academy and are really kind of impressive. I think the one player that maybe is kind of catching the eye quite a bit this season is probably Jack Cooper-Love at Skovda AIK. Sorry, he's got 6 goals. He's also the top player in the league for sort of expected goals and expected assists combined. He's having a great season, but I think he's already owned by Elfsborg. I'm pretty sure I'm right in saying. So he's not one that's sort of a pure second division talent, but in terms of the loan spell he's having, he's doing quite well. And I'm not sure. I think he might have an English background as well, Jack Cooper-Love. So he's one to look out for, a 20-year-old striker. And he's on loan from Elfsborg in the second tier. So yeah, maybe one for you there, Francisco, to look at. Thank you very much for that question. Steve, should we wrap it up for part 1?
There's just one more I want to talk about. It was from Norlink86. Ex-Everton goalie Thomas Mira making quite an impact. His first head coach position at Moss F Core, 8 out of 8 to start the season with. One thing I'll say there, it's the Sean Constable impact. He did the same at Bromma Poikina, didn't he? Had a season there, set them up from a problematic position they're in, and the season after they got promoted, maybe he's done the same at Moss. They fire him, and now Myra's picking up the pieces. So good to him. But Sean Constable, he's the doctor that can bring him in. He'll sort of mess out, and eventually he'll come right. That's what I've got to say there.
There you go. Well done to Thomas Myra and well done to Sean Constable. Obviously, good times for Moss. Things are seeming to improve. And thanks very much for your question there. I don't believe he follows us, so I don't know how he's even seen it. But fair play to him at Norlink86, who is a Moss fan indeed. So that will wrap it up for part 1. In part 2, we'll head over to Sweden and we'll look at the latest in Sweden. We will also continue with the listener questions. I think we've made it through about half of them so far. But thanks so much for everyone who's tweeted us at Nordic Footpod. Don't forget, every week you can do that. And if you're on Patreon as well, you can always leave your questions on the in the comments on the weekly shows as well. We love to hear what you think of our predictions. So we will be back after this short break.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wiss and I'm with Jonathan Verdugba. Swedish section now on the cards for us, and only really one place to start because some silverware has been dished out in the past week. The Swedish Cup final was between Malmö and Hammarby. Jonathan, you're here to tell us all about it.
Yeah, Malmö are the Swedish Cup winners. That game took place last midweek. I think it was last Thursday. It's a bit strange how the cup is done. You know, they tend to be played in the middle of the week. It's a really good turnout, in fairness. good crowd at the Tele2 Arena. Both sets of fans loud. A lot of controversy. We're seeing this across the board, aren't we, in Europe at the moment? These sort of pitch invasions when teams win games. There was a sort of ugly scenes, to be fair, at the end of the at the end of the match. There was some pretty ugly scenes. I have to say, the game was paused and. Fans running to the pitch and that kind of thing, and the flares was thrown, I think, into the Hammarby fans section, stuff like that, Malmö fans section. So it got ugly, but in general, it was Malmö. You can never write them off. Penalty shootout. It was a 0-0 draw, of course, and went to penalties. Ismail Diawara, the hero, the penalty king, he made some key penalty saves, and Astrid Selmani. With an absolutely dreadful last penalty. Kind of game where Hammarby, I was surprised actually, Steve, that Hammarby were big favourites for this match in terms of the odds. I think Malmö could be had for about 3.9 odds, which I found ridiculous. I thought there was huge value in Malmö, but unfortunately, I think if you were looking for the value, maybe it would have been for them to win the cup rather than to win the match. Malmö aren't necessarily in great shape at the moment. They had a couple more injuries even in this game. Oskar Lewicki went off injured and just generally kind of, they weren't convincing. But at the end of the day, you've got to put the ball in the back of the net. And I always say these big teams, they've got that experience, even if it was in someone like Malmö in a one-off game, you can't really rule them out. And ultimately, although it was a penalty shootout, they have got the job done and they have lifted that Swedish Cup.
Yeah, I think both finals, Swedish Cup and Danish Cup, were on at the same time, and both ended 0-0, didn't they, Jonathan? I think both were decided on penalties. I was looking at the stats for the Swedish Cup final, though. I didn't see it, but it was about 70 minutes, and there was hardly a shot at either end. The statistics showed a very tight game of football. As you can sometimes get that in cup finals, can't you? But I mean, Malmö were missing about half their team, weren't they? Or were set to. I don't know whether many actually came back from fitness for that game. But you always said on this podcast, never write off Malmö, and that match kind of proves why, doesn't it? In the really big moments, I guess the squad just find a way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you got to bear in mind as well before the game, you got Milojevic, 3 straight defeats for Malmö, which is unthinkable for the club. Probably they lost this game. You could argue might have even been potential candidate to be sacked because, that's how desperate it was getting. But, against his former club as well, don't forget, there were boos for him whenever his face appeared on the screen and that kind of thing. But eventually he's won his first title with the club. He can, even if he left tomorrow, you can say he's won a trophy at Malmö. So fair play to him from that point of view. There was all the controversy in the summer, obviously being terminated by Hammarby after meeting with Rosenborg and all that sort of that saga that dragged on. And it was a bit, ironic that he's playing against that team in the cup final in their stadium, of course. They weren't great. Again, I've said it, this season. I'm not convinced by Malmö. I think it's not a surprise to me that they're kind of a lot of talk at the moment about them needing sort of 2 or 3 players in the summer window because they do look a bit short. Had a couple of efforts, but Berman Savic had one decent effort. Kiese Tellin looked a bit out of sorts. He's maybe not quite match fit, and they weren't really that impressive. I think Hammarby just couldn't get the job done. And at the end of the day, if you can't get the job done, you leave yourself open for penalty shootouts. Diawara described himself as a penalty specialist. Said it's one of the best days of his career. Of course, don't forget he was at Degerfors about this time last year. And has now played sort of Champions League football and won a cup in a big final. So he's had a real upturn of events. The big goalkeeper. So yeah, all in all, I think that it wasn't great scenes at the end of it. Of course, with what happened with the chairs being thrown and things being thrown and the pitch invasion, that kind of thing. It wasn't nice. But I mean, the big thing with Astrid Selmani, I mean, that the penalty, Steve, was just dreadful. I have to say. One of the worst penalties I think I've seen in some time from someone who's supposed to be a top striker for this level. He's having a nightmare season, really. I know he got his first goal, but he is not having a good season at all. And this just capped off the kind of egg on his face in what's been a pretty scrambled, eggy season for him.
Yeah, so, well, congratulations to Malmö then. And what impact does that have for the European positions, Jonathan? You might not actually know the answer to that. It just came into my mind now as a question. But who will now qualify for Conference League and stuff?
Well, I don't know. You're going to have to look that up yourself, I'm afraid. You can't ask me that after you didn't want to answer the question about Lillestrøm. What the hell is that? No, actually, to be fair, I do have the answer for you.
Oh.
Elfsborg will now be in the Conference League.
Fantastic news.
There you go.
Fully deserved as well. They had a really good season last year.
Yeah. Malmö already in the Champions League, of course. And Hammarby lost, of course. So AIK and Djurgården, I think, are also in the Conference League and will be joined by Elfsborg.
Very, very good indeed. So now we've had a managerial sacking. First one, I think, in Allsvenskan or Eliteserien this season off the top of my head. I feel like I might be missing some, but yeah, Helsingborg have sacked their manager. It looked initially like they might get a sort of a new manager syndrome because I saw they were 1-0 up against AIK at half time, but eventually lost. But what's been going on at Helsingborg and what has prompted this managerial change?
Yeah, well, we did say that kind of there was, a lot of rumours about him leaving potentially. I'm sorry about Jürgen Andersen sort of losing his job, and eventually that's what's happened. Essentially, he's been sacked. Not been a good season for Helsingborg. Even if you look at the underlying data, kind of for expected goals and expected goals against, they're kind of struggling. haven't really impressed, and so yeah, he's off. He's been let go. Former AFK Göteborg manager, of course, back in his day. I think it's a bit harsh in the sense that obviously him getting them promoted, it's still quite early in the season, really. But Helsingborg are quite a big club, and they've got quite a nasty element in their fan base in terms of like they're not patient, really. They're the kind of club that they do have that tendency to have fan unrest and angry fans. You know, if you look at it, 1 win in 11 games, Steve, obviously 18 goals conceded in 11 matches, not really scoring goals either, not just 9 goals scored, 5 points. They're not in huge trouble, you know, but they are kind of, if you look at where Varberg boys are in 13th, you know, they're 6 points off that with a game more played. So it didn't look, they are trending as if they are going to probably be in the bottom 3 this season. So probably was, you know, something that they needed to do, you know, if they want to look to the long term and trying to stay up. They aren't traditionally the kind of club that you would sort of say should be in Superettan, really. So I guess you can kind of understand it is I suppose what I'm trying to say. The new managers come in. It's been announced actually just kind of recently in the last hour or two. Alvaro Santos and Matthias Lindstrom have been announced as the head coaches. Helsingborg has full confidence in them, they've announced. So there will be no head coach recruited. These are internal appointments. So they will get the job on a permanent basis. They had the responsibility in the game against AIK. Obviously, they've been there for a week, and the discussions have sort of gone quite well. And it's decided that they will be given the chance to sort of try and get HIF out of this trouble that they're in.
I never really was impressed with Lennartson at Lillestrøm either, to be honest. Just a manager I don't personally rate that highly.
An interesting bit there, Steve, just to interrupt you, sorry. In the announcement from Helsingborg, they said that instead of hiring new managers, they're going to announce that they are going to bring in a sports psychologist. So that's the only appointment they will make on this. So Alvaro and Mattia have been in the under-21 teams and that kind of thing. They've been at the club for quite a while. And Andreas Grenqvist said, who's the sporting director, said that he has strong belief that they are the coaches and that the development of the team in the last few years at youth level gives them confidence that they can lead the first team. So, yeah, interesting there about sports psychology and maybe
very interesting.
Maybe help the current squad at first team level.
I think that is, to be honest, not to be laughed at these days. These top clubs are hiring these guys out now. I mean, Liverpool have got about 10 of them, haven't they? You know, got a penalty psychological coach, everything like that. But they can make a difference. I mean, does it suggest to you that perhaps it's more of a mental sort of issue that they've got there at Helsingborg rather than a squad issue? Maybe it could be. I mean, who knows? But that could be a good move, you know. It genuinely could be. It might work out for them, in my opinion.
It's definitely forward thinking, isn't it? And I mean, I agree with you. I think sports psychology plays a huge part in modern football with things like social media prevalent. You know, there are different challenges now for the modern player to deal with, which a lot of the time are in the mind as well as the body. Helsingborg, I mean, you asked me that question. I think in general, Helsingborg are a big club, you know, and they are the sort of club, as I've said before, that kind of, if things don't go well, they are a bit not, as I've said, they've got a bit of an element to them. You know, their fans are kind of like they are, even in recent games, they've been kind of like getting on the players' backs and there's been like protests and things like that. They are known to kind of have little fights and things like that outside the stadium. They're not, you know, they are a bit of a moody fan base, I'd say. In the most positive way, if that makes sense. You know, I'm not criticizing them, but I'm just saying they do have that element where it's not like a small nothing club where nothing ever happens and you can kind of get away with it and you're expected to sort of be in Superettan. This is a team that has bigger ambitions. So from that point of view, maybe psychology does play a part in it. They were a bit unlucky. They were furious about a penalty that AIK got in that game, the 2-1 defeat that they had. Jordan Larson, obviously, against his former club. The player that I remember when Helsingborg got relegated all those years ago, they ran on the pitch and the fans tried to tear Jordan Larson's shirt off his back when he was a Helsingborg player. So I'm sure he might have enjoyed that goal against his former team. And that just gives you an example of the kind of atmosphere that they can have at Helsingborg, ripping a shirt off one of their own players' backs. I'll never forget that incident. And Anders Lindegaard also has come out and said that he thinks that the players are happy with the choice of the new managers. So obviously he's a goalkeeper, used to play for Manchester United, veteran keeper. So I guess all in all, let's see how they can get on and good luck to them. I mean, you funnily enough, you say it, Stephen. Anders Lindegaard does agree with you. He said everyone is talking about Klopp and Guardiola, and I think football has changed a lot in 5 to 10 years. We have facing a revolution among coaches, and these two are a more progressive choice. They are young. They each have an area of expertise, one on the offensive and the other on the defensive side of the game. So, yeah, I mean, Lennartson, he's a coach that I quite like him, actually. I've met him in the past when I was in Gothenburg, and he's he seemed like a nice guy. Anyway, can't say I know him that well. But, he's seemed quite cordial to me. But yeah, he hasn't really inspired them, I'd say, this season so far. So maybe this modern style of coach could work.
I remember, Jonathan, when me and you used to work together for a football company in London, nearly 10 years ago now, actually. Might have been the 11. I actually did a favour one day for someone, and I covered a Swedish game, and it was the Helsingborg actually won the title that season. Pretty sure they did anyway. And this is a club that's got a big history, and I can see why the fans get frustrated. I might be wrong here, but I feel like their fan base might be similar to sort of like a Newcastle or a Sunderland or a Forest or even a Leeds when things weren't going so well. They kind of expect more and demand more, and that is hard on the players, isn't it? Like, if they lose again, they're going to look at social media. It's like, oh, you're shit, you're terrible, things like that. So that's going to be the psychological coach could be very advantageous there to help the players out, I think.
Definitely, yeah. And one other little just tidbit of information. I mean, moving on from Helsingborg, just on that cup final that might interest you, and we will talk about this in a sec as well. But Manchester City actually had scouts at that cup final to watch Williot Swedberg. So that is a bit of an interesting tidbit of information as the race heats up for his signature.
I mean, is he leaving this summer? Do you think, is there a way that Hammarby can keep him until October, do you think?
No, I think he'll leave this summer. I mean, Lokomotiv Moscow are probably not very happy about everything that's transpired, because they would have had a hell of a player on their hands to resell. I guess there's bigger issues going on in the world at this moment in time in that part of the world for sure. But the deal was pretty much wrapped up for him, and the only thing that stopped it was obviously the whole situation with Ukraine. The way things have developed now, I mean, Barcelona have been watching him, Manchester City have been watching him. The most recent rumours and reports from Expressen, a sort of leading Swedish newspaper, is that Celta Vigo and Club Brugge are intensively negotiating with Hammarby for his signature. Their sporting director Jesper Janssen has said that we have concrete offers now for him on the table. Both of those clubs are aggressively sort of chasing him. He said, we continue the dialogue, we'll see how we go. We wanted to wait until after the cup final and the spring season is over, and we are in no need of selling, but it is also about the players' interest. But we must stress we are not in need of selling. So I think we are probably watching his last 3 or 4 games for Hammarby and possibly in Sweden as well, unless there's a loan option. But he's done that well this season, Steve, that it doesn't surprise me that the likes of Man City are just having a little look at him in the cup final.
I'll just stay with Swedberg here, because this move for someone of his age now, what sort of football level should he be playing? Forget what club he goes to. He could easily go somewhere and they loan him out. What standard of football does he need to be playing right now to improve his development, do you think?
Well, I think Francisco Martins, who asked us a question on Twitter, I think he's got a good point about Portugal. I think Swedberg's kind of got that technical profile where I think he'd be very good at a club like sort of Sporting Lisbon, maybe, or I'm trying to think, like maybe not Porto. They play a slightly different style, but maybe Sporting Lisbon or a Braga, like I said, someone like that, maybe. I think he's got that technical ability. I could actually see him ending up in somewhere like Spain. Netherlands as well, I think will be a good move for him. I don't physically, I think he's, he's a tall lad. He looks quite fit and athletic, but I'm not sure if Belgium is the most natural progression for him. I think he could maybe move to say the Netherlands. If you look at someone like Jesper Karlsson, who's done so well at AZ Alkmaar, I could see him kind of being the similar, someone like that. Patrick Wallenmark at Feyenoord. I'd kind of like to see Swedberg at somewhere like Ajax maybe, or PSV, someone like that. I think he's got the ability to play at that level. Celta Vigo would be a big jump up. You know what I mean? I think, that level is quite high. Would he get in the team? I'm not entirely sure. I don't know the ins and outs of the club, but Bruges, I'm sure he'd get in the team, and I think he'd do quite well in Belgium. But I think he's over the level to go to sort of a Portugal, a Netherlands, that kind of even maybe sort of lower tier Bundesliga. Maybe be in around the squad of a sort of a Bundesliga team like Stuttgart, someone like that. I think he's very, very good. It's not a surprise to me that Manchester City watching him. He is he has got that profile at 18 years of age where there's a lot of room for development there, and the basic groundings of his technical profile are really, really good. He scored a lot of goals this season. He's shown he can score different types of goals. He can get poachers goals. He can score spectacular goals. He can play off both feet. So I really do think that he is, sometimes we don't we get it, Steve? We get players who are kind of flash in the pan, or you want them to stay a bit longer to prove themselves. I'll be honest, I think Swedberg has shown already in this short time that he is probably too good for Allsvenskan, really, and will go on to that next level.
Yeah, I think that would sound great if he went somewhere like Portugal. I'd hate to see him go somewhere like Man City because they're only thinking of one thing, that's profit. He'd probably go there, he'd probably never make an appearance for them. They'd loan him out for about 4 seasons and sell him. That's their sort of thing. Chelsea did that with a lot of players, didn't they, as well? But obviously, it's not a surprise they're there because they see him as someone with great potential, don't they? So,
and there's another player, actually, before we move on. There's another player at Hammarby who's got less fanfare, but is also equally coveted. Mikael Lardo. He's a 19-year-old, Mikael Lardo, 19. And the big reports in Swedish media at the moment is that Groningen and Heerenveen are in for him. He's not played as much this season in the league for Hammarby, but he has started to come into the team more recently. Started some games. But he's also a talented player, and it looks like he will be leaving as well. And obviously, he's looking like he'll go to the Netherlands. So I don't see why Swedberg couldn't follow him.
Well, good luck whatever happens to Swedberg, a fine talent. And we now move back to Allsvenskan, the table itself, and Häcken are top. And shouldn't they? Is this what they should have been doing last season, Jonathan? I remember everyone was predicting, was it second last year, including yourself, and it feels like it's 12 months too late. They're going really well, 23 points on the board, and they've played a game less than IE Core. So, Häcken, what is the secret to their success so far this season?
I think, number one, Jeremiev has found his form. I think last season he underperformed. We talked about Hammarby just now. They lost to Vålerenga, by the way, at the weekend after the Swedish Cup. They had a bit of a hangover, 1-0 defeat. They've got a decent striker who's performing quite well, Antonsson. And I think Jeremiev, obviously, top scorer in the league this season, and he's doing similarly well. I think he's really hit his shooting boots. I said it last year, Steve, in the season preview podcast. I remember it. I remember saying that him coming back from Germany, Jeremiev, he had a bit of a mixed spell in Germany. I think it was at Dresden, and I thought he'd come back and the maturity would see him be really, really good. Didn't quite work out in that way, but I guess he's jumped a year, and this year he's really come back and he's really firing on all cylinders. I think he's got 10 goals already, which is incredible. And expected goals and assists total 7.86. So he's even getting, he's even weighing in with a few assists. I think Mikael Rygaard has been a great signing, the Danish midfielder. I think he's done really well. I think Oscar Udenas is a great young talent. I really like the look of him. I mentioned him in the season preview. So I think they've strengthened well. They've recruited well, actually. But I think the key thing is Jeremiev is banging those goals that maybe last season he had a bit of an injury problem last season. And this season he seems to be fit and firing. So I think he is really the key.
Yeah, 22 total goals for Häcken this season, the most out of any team in the league. They don't do that many clean sheets, do they? But I looked at the highlights of this game against Sirius. In the weekend preview show, I actually suggested they would be one of the best bets of the round, Häcken. And they only just won. It was a freak late 95th minute winner. They just conceded. And then they beat Sirius, I think, 4-3. So moments like that, you just look back on, you think maybe that's a key moment. And I guess the big question is, do you think they can stay in title contention, or do you expect them to sort of drop down a bit?
Well, it was a crazy end to the game, by the way. 96th minute goal from Hovland after a 94th minute equaliser from Kouakou, after an 85th minute, what seemed like a winner from Rygaard. Crazy, 4 goals in the last 15 minutes in that game there was, by the way. And one other little point as well, they're strengthening their squad quite well. Häcken. Blair Turgott came on and got an assist. He's obviously come from Östersund. Bit of a weird situation with him. He didn't get a club. There was talks he was going to go to Saudi Arabia. Then there was talks he was going to go to, I think, Netherlands. Ended up with no club. And now he's turned up at sort of Häcken on a free transfer. But that's a great addition to their squad, bearing in mind the injuries they've got. Of course, Benny Traore being out for the season. But yeah, I think they've improved their squad really well. Last season, maybe they were a bit lightweight. This season, I think they've gone for a little bit more experience. As I mentioned, the likes of Hovland, born in 89, he got the winner. He's an experienced player. Rygaard is, in his 30s. He's an experienced player. Obviously, you've got the youth of Udena still there, and the likes of Berger and Bengtsson. But they've just strengthened a little bit in terms of that spine of the team. It's just slightly stronger now, I think, with the likes of Rygaard, as I say, and Hovland. So Thomas Totland as well as a player. I think you quite liked him, didn't you? And those sort of players are just sort of strengthening that whole squad. So fair play to them. Häcken, I don't think they'll win the title, but they're definitely giving a much better go of it last season when everyone expected them to win the title. Of course, don't forget they won this game, Steve, with 10 men because the goalkeeper Abrahamson was sent off in the 55th minute. So they're showing a lot of resilience as well, Häcken. So fair play to them, and they are top of Allsvenskan.
Yeah, I did certainly like Totland at the Tromsø there. That looked like a good signing. And the city of Gothenburg, 35 league titles have been won by clubs from this city down the years. But do you know the last time a team from that city won the league, Jonathan? What year?
A city from where?
Gothenburg. League title, Allsvenskan title. It was EF and it was
2015?
in 2007.
I was going to say 2007, actually.
So imagine if it was Häcken. Häcken have never won it, of course. So imagine if they were the team that broke that duck as such. Doing really well and playing good. I like watching their games. They're exciting. That you're not going to get many 0-0s with Häcken, even last season as well, when they were not so good. I like their style of football for sure. So just looking also in terms of the league. So when we talked about Malmö there in the cup, but in the league it has been a struggle for them. They did get a win against Degerfors the weekend, but previously they'd lost 3 in a row. They definitely the sort of team who are going to enjoy this 3 or 4 week break, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they. The next round of games is until June 26th. They are going to need a lot of rest. I think they're going to make some changes. I think the squad will change, and in this as we head into this long break, what have we got? 3 weeks. Which I actually, by the way, Steve, I think this is a big mistake from the schedulers. I know it's a little bit to do with the internationals and stuff like that, but the season's just ended, and what you really want now is kind of the summer leagues to kick in. I think you get maximum attention now for this next month. So I think this is a big mistake from schedulers. And if I was working for the Swedish, federation or working for the Allsvenskan, I'd suggest that they try and get as many games in June as possible, because this is the period of time. Surely it's the summer. There's no other leagues on. You get maximum visibility for your league. Anyway, Malmö are 5th as we go into this break, and they've also played a game more than Häcken, and they're 5 points behind them. So not having a great time of it. There is a little bit of rumours of unrest behind the scenes. There's talks about the transfer window that apparently Milojevic, who it does seem, I did mention in pre-season show that he has tended to fall out with clubs. He's got a bit of a history of falling out with his clubs, as is the case with Hammarby when he left. Does seem that there's a little bit of unrest. There's rumours they don't agree on the transfers that he wants, the board and the manager. One rumour that came out is about Isaac Janssen at Kalmar. He's apparently a target for Malmö. But the other suggestions are sort of suggesting, this is just media reports, I don't know if it's true at all. But media reports sort of suggest that the recruitment strategy isn't shared by everybody. So that remains to be seen what will happen. There's links as well with Saidi from Degerfors that is meant to be rumoured to go to Malmö as well in this window. So the sort of transfer window is starting to heat up now. That the sort of rumour mill is starting to go, and obviously the summer window is open now in the major European leagues, isn't it? So we will see probably some players leaving the league before the next round of games. But in general, it seems that Malmö, according to a lot of reports, they want to sign a winger, an attacking midfielder, and a defensive midfielder. And also Milojevic wants to get rid of some of his players, and he wants a bigger squad and then more squad in his own name. So we will learn a lot about whether the board are going to back him and how they feel about him, and probably by how much they support him in this transfer window coming.
Do you think if they had not won that Swedish Cup final, they would be sacking him this month?
I'm not sure if they'd sack him immediately, because I think they need to save face as well. I don't think, bear in mind that they did support him and gave him the job. And it would be an admission of guilt on their part as well, because it's their first sort of this new structure. It will be their first appointment since obviously Thomason left. So they've also got a little bit of their own reputation on the line here. But yeah, I think if they'd have lost the cup final, that he would have been under a lot of pressure. I think that the cup's kind of helped him I don't think he'd been sacked, but bear in mind they just beat Degerfors 2-0 as well. I think there would have been a bit of pressure. Toivonen obviously got goals. They've had injuries, so it's a bit harsh. It's a bit hard to criticise them too much. Yeah. But I do think that all is not well at Malmö. That's what I'd say.
Now, I've got a question for you here. And now it's interesting. I just talked about the cities that have won the most Allsvenskan titles down the years. Obviously, Gothenburg has 35 titles. Stockholm has 25. And Malmö has 22. Norrköping has 14. Vasen, thank you very much for your support of the podcast, as always. He asks, out of the teams outside of the three biggest cities in Sweden, who do you think has the biggest shot of battling for the top positions? Now, I know that doesn't actually leave many teams, does it? So, but who would you say, Jonathan, here?
A very clever question from Oscar Holt there, with Kalmar, his team in sixth. Thanks a lot for the question. I mean, I think I'll probably say Elfsborg. just to tease Weston there. It doesn't leave many, does it? I mean, you've only got Kalmar, Elfsborg, or Mjällby. Or
Norrköping. I mean, do we class Norrköping? Would Norrköping be in the?
I suppose
no, the fourth biggest city, wouldn't it?
They're major in terms of titles, aren't they? So there's only leaves three teams in the top 8, which is, like I say, Kalmar, Elfsborg, and Mjällby. Of those three, I'd say that Elfsborg are the strongest in terms of their overall squad. So my answer would be Elfsborg, probably. I think if you look at the stats in terms of XG and things like that, Elfsborg, although they're not having the best of seasons, their expected goals third in the league, and expected goals against, they're one of the better teams. So if you're the best team statistically in terms of expected goals against, the best in the league, 9.27 XGA. So I have to argue that's according to Y-Scout data, by the way, our partners Y-Scout. So unfortunately, although I know you want me to give a certain answer, I'd have to say Elfsborg at this moment in time. They're not playing that well. They're not getting the results, Elfsborg, but I think we'll see if things change in the second half of the season. I think they might have a bit of an uptick.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for the question anyway, as always. And let's just, before we finish, look at the bottom of the table there. Helsingborg are on 5 points. Degerfors on 6. Sundsvall 6. Varberg and Värnamo on 11 and 12. And you've been impressed with Värnamo recently, Jonathan, haven't you? I mean, did we talk about it in the last episode, or was it one of the bonus ones where we were kind of not criticising them, but kind of worrying about the golfing class moving up to Allsvenskan level? But they've come up, to be fair with them. The last 3 matches, they've got themselves 7 points, and you can't knock beating Hammarby 1-0. I think in XG terms, they deserved it as well. It wasn't a fluke.
Yeah, it wasn't a fluke. I think the timing was good for them. Obviously, playing them, they just played on a Thursday and then playing them on a Sunday. I think there was a bit of fatigue there for Hammarby. I think, given the game went all the way as well to penalties, I think there was a bit of it was a good time to play them. Värnamo have been pretty good this season, actually, at home. They got a draw against Malmö at home, beat Degerfors, obviously. The only game they really struggled against at home was Häcken. They lost 2-1. So maybe that says something about Häcken as well, by the way. But no, they've done really well at Värnamo this season. I said in pre-season I thought they'd go down, straight back down, and I'm going to have to probably rethink that at some point because I've been pretty impressed with them. Likes of Oscar Johansson, I think, is having a really great season. Antonsson's an extremely good buy. Defensively, they look quite sharp. They've had a couple of injuries, but all in all, they look quite good. Had a bit of a blip against Mjällby away where they conceded that late goal from a defensive mistake. But all things considered, they've looked pretty good, and obviously beat Helsingborg 4-1. So no, I like what I've seen from Värnamo, I have to say, and maybe I'm going to have to revisit my predictions on them.
Yeah, I was looking at a few games recently. I actually watched a bit of GIF for Sundsvall. Jonathan beat Mjällby 2-0. And they have quite a catchy goal song, don't they? I've never heard it before. Probably because probably the first time they've scored at home this season, I think. But, I mean, it does look like them bottom 3 at the moment are in a bit of trouble. With maybe Varberg as well could get sucked into some danger. But Värnamo, fair play to them. If they were to survive, that would be quite a big thing, wouldn't it, considering the size of the club?
If Värnamo were to survive, I mean, it'd be massive. The fact that they're even competing with Malmö, I think, is probably an indicator that Malmö aren't having the best of seasons. The fact that they get a draw with them, they're their neighbours, well, kind of fairly near neighbours, and don't forget our one-time guest, Robin Asterhead, went and joined Malmö as chief scout instead of taking the Varnum manager's job. So that gives you an insight into how the sort of various jobs are ranked, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? The size of the two clubs. I think they've got a great chance to stay up. I know GIF Sundsvall, I was surprised in pre-season about their predictions. People saying they will go straight back down. So maybe at the moment it's a bit more kind of in tune to form. It's looking maybe like Sundsvall will struggle more than Varnum. And don't forget, Varnum had a great season when they came up. So, maybe I was a little bit harsh. I didn't see how the squad could survive. But I might have to revisit that. My other bottom three, I had Degerfors and Helsingborg. So those two are looking sort of pretty decent predictions so far. But yeah, let's obviously see how it goes.
All right. Well, some questions then to finish off the podcast. Stuart Kelly, are the refs in Sweden being deliberately shite or are they just crap? Sounds like the officiating's been a bit questionable up there recently.
Yeah, there has been some poor decisions of late. I think Hammarby and a lot of the big teams as well, AIK, Hammarby, Malmö games have seemed to have a bit of dodgy decisions in them. It's a great question, to be fair, because there's been a lot of people calling for VAR in Allsvenskan now, and I've got to be honest, Steve, I think that would be a nightmare for me. One reason I like this league is because you can kind of get away from the nightmares of VAR. Don't know if anyone saw the Huddersfield Nottingham Forest game, but I don't, VAR doesn't exactly solve anything.
It doesn't. For me, it doesn't. And it's been the same in Norway, by the way. There's been calls for VAR there as well.
Yeah, I mean, it did. Anyone who saw that Huddersfield game, Nottingham Forest, it was a scandalous decisions. I think eventually VAR will come to Scandinavia. That's the bottom line, because the technology's there, isn't it? And every time there's a bad decision, there's going to be people calling for the technology to be introduced. I wouldn't be against it maybe for offsides. I think there's been some poor offsides actually this season that I think, if I remember rightly, AIK got really bad offside decision against them in the Stockholm derby. But it's more like crowd trouble as well. There's been a lot of things like, objects being thrown at refs and things like that, games being interrupted. There's been a lot of unrest off the pitch as well as with the refereeing decisions this season. But yeah, it's a good question. The referees it's not been a great start to the season for refs, I'd say. I think there has been quite a lot of poor decisions, but that's part of football, isn't it? At the end of the day, you just have to live with it and deal with it. I always, pre-VAR, Steve, I always felt that it would even itself out over a season. You might get a couple of bad decisions against you per season, but really, the Championship Player Final was a great example for me, because it was all about, there's no VAR in the entire league season. Let's have VAR for this playoff final because, it will kind of make sure we get all the decisions right for this huge game, if that makes sense. And they got two of the biggest decisions probably completely wrong. So that sums it up for me. It's still always going to be subjective. You're never going to have clear decisions that kind of really help. So, yes, the refs haven't been great, but is VAR great? In my opinion, we're better off without it.
It spoils it for me, the top leagues. I mean, even the Champions League final, how long were we waiting for some of them decisions? It was ridiculous. And even then, probably the decisions weren't right.
The disallowed goal for Liverpool.
Yeah, but how long does it take?
The disallowed goal for Real Madrid, of
course. It took about 10 minutes, didn't it? Like, genuinely. I mean, it's just, it doesn't solve anything. And, I've obviously, as a betting man, I've had some times this year in Norway where I've looked back at a replay and I'm like, damn, that should have been a goal. Or that should never have been a goal. There's a clear foul there. But you just shake it off because it's done. The decision's in the book. You move on. And like it used to be. But anyway, one more question from Flying Dutchman. Mjällby and Nkwanko's season. What do you make of that?
Yeah, that's a question from... I can't remember who it's from.
Flying Dutchman.
Right, yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, I don't know exactly the spirit of this question because I know there's been a bit of a mini rant on this one, actually, Steve. But obviously there's been, the Silas Nwankwo, the story behind him is that when he signed for Mjällby, the pictures of him when he was announced at the club, obviously you had, the claim is that he's 18 years old, but in the picture, I think he looks, let's just say, a little bit older than 18, obviously being a Nigerian player. But I have to say, I actually think this has been really overblown. And I think, I don't know. I mean, listen, my background is Nigerian. So of course I know the history of like cheating, age cheating, that kind of thing that's come at youth levels of Nigerian football. There's no denying that. But I actually think this is a little bit harsh. Nwankwo, in the games I've seen for Mjällby, he does not look like someone who's, ridiculously old, if that makes sense. He does actually have quite a lithe frame about him. And, I remember one of the goals he scored. I can't remember who it was against. It might have been Sirius. I'm trying to think in my mind, but he's actually, he actually does have a kind of physique of a young player. So I don't really like this, if I'm honest. I think there's a bit of, I've seen a lot on Twitter about him and, a lot of sort of snide comments about him and stuff like that. People age at different ways. There's a lot of players, Swedish players, who you would say, and, you don't exactly look young in themselves. So I think there's a little bit of tongue in cheek there. I actually think Nwanko's had a decent season so far. The thoughts were that Mamadou Mora would be the main man for them, but he's tailed off a little bit in recent weeks. And Nwanko has added something a little bit different to them. Mjällby have kind of tailed off in recent weeks. They're not having they've dropped down the table a little bit. That defense that was so solid is got a little bit weaker. Injury to Kritzak hasn't helped him. Obviously, he's been suspended. Sorry. But yeah, I don't know really. I'm not entirely sure what the question is there with Nwanko, if it's a genuine question or if it's kind of tongue in cheek. But he's got 3 goals this season in 325 minutes, so he is doing all right. Yeah, I think it was a serious game. So I quite, I think he's actually done better and deserves a little bit more credit than he's getting at the moment. I think that the criticisms are, I don't know the ins and outs of the situation in his background, but at the same time, I think it's a little bit harsh to just the ridiculous, overblown reaction to him in the pictures.
And just briefly, are you excited? This was a question from the man himself about the return of Mr. Ashley Coffey for the second half of the season, John.
Well, what's happened to Ashley Coffey? I want to know myself. Where is he? I mean, this is a former guest, AFC Eskilstuna's fine striker, Englishman, Yorkshireman, I believe. Where is he? He just seems to have disappeared. I'm very excited for your return, Ashley. If you're listening to this, get yourself on the show while you're not doing much. If you're injured, I don't know. Get yourself back as a guest or as a pundit. And just briefly on Super Essen before we wrap up, Steve. Augury to bottom of the league. I mean, we're going to have another Gothenburg team maybe.
I know. Oh, I saw that. It's awful.
In the second bottom, so a real nightmare for those 2 O's at the moment. Something needs to be done about Gothenburg football, really, doesn't it? If only there was a Englishman who could come in maybe and give some recruitment advice or something to these clubs, because it is not great seeing Geis and Augury going down to the third tier. I can tell you that as a former Gothenburg
resident.
Yeah, resident. Shocking. But yeah, Ashley, get yourself back on the show. We miss you.
There's been a lot of other questions as well, which we couldn't do this show. We've run out of time now. Thanks for your questions. If we missed any off, we'll do our best to do them next time as well. CJ as well. We've not forgotten you, mate, at Odin's Creation. We'll get onto that one at the next episode. But that's it for this one. And remember, follow us on the socials, at Nordic Foot Pod, at Meatman Soccer for me, at JF Football for you, Jonathan. And that's it. Take care. See you next time. And enjoyed it, Jonathan, as ever.
Yeah, I just want to give a quick shout out to Emil Koch, I think Lily White for Life, at Lily White for Life, Odin's Creation, who asked about HamCam, and a few others. We will try and answer some of those other questions, either on the weekend preview show or on next week's episode. So just remind us as well next week, if we haven't answered your question, just tweet it again, and we'll get onto it next week, because we did have literally more than 20 questions this week, which is hard to fit into 1 hour show. But thank you, everyone. And don't forget patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. Thanks so much to the new subscribers. And I guess in the next week or so, Steve, we'll be doing a lot of transfer stuff, because we've got a little bit of a break in terms of games now.
Yeah, well, we're doing some of that. We're doing some more Patreon stuff. And I said, thanks for them questions. Some really do deserve a great, dignified, long answer, actually. That's why we can't fit them in for this show. But yeah, thanks very much. All appreciate your support. Take care. Stay safe. See you next time. Goodbye from me.
Goodbye, all.